If you're new to disc golf, you may have heard longtime players refer to their coveted old discs as PFN discs. PFN stands for pre-flight number, or basically a disc that was released before Innova invented the flight number rating system that is widely used today by nearly every manufacturer. But just how good were PFN discs? Well, we're going to find out by testing 6 old pre-flight number discs against their modern counterparts, because the disc is in the details. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and this is my pre-flight number champion Orc from about 2004. It was one of the first discs I ever bought. In fact, it was probably also my putter back in 2004 because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. That being said, it wasn't the only disc I had. I also had a pre-flight number champion Firebird, DX T-Bird, and DX Dragon. But what's so special about pre-flight number discs? Are they all better than the discs that we have today? Well, the simple answer is no, of course not. The first thing we need to keep in mind is that this was still the early days of disc golf manufacturing. Innova released the revolutionary Eagle, the first beveled edge disc, aka not Frisbee, back in 1983. But their flight rating system wasn't introduced until 2008. And there's no reason why that 25-year period would produce discs that are somehow better than today. Innovations and advancements in technology, from computers and 3D design software to injection molding machines and plastics, have made it easier than ever for companies to plan and execute a disc design exactly as intended. So I ask again, what's so special about pre-flight number discs? Well, there isn't really anything special about all pre-flight number discs. What is special about some of them is that they come from what people refer to as money runs. And to understand what a money run is, we have to kind of understand how injection molding works. I've shown this graphic numerous times in our videos simply to show the concept of injection molding. But we need to talk about what the mold here actually is. This is a very large, very heavy, extremely precisely machined, and extremely expensive piece of steel or aluminum. Because it's so heavy, it's hard to move. And because it's hard to move, it's easy to damage, especially if it's made of aluminum. And because of all of these things, if you're going to go to the trouble of taking this huge, expensive, delicate mold and setting it up on your machine, you're going to make darn sure that you're going to use it for a while, which is why injection molding companies make runs of products. A run could be anywhere from a few hundred to tens of thousands of a single item. But here's the thing, because they run all of the discs they're going to sell for maybe an entire year at one time, this is where different variables can affect the ultimate flight of those discs that they make at a specific time. Conditions in the factory like temperature and humidity, to how fast the material is cooled, or the mold itself can have an impact on how flat or domey, or stiff or flexible the disc ends up ultimately being. And if one run is done in January and another is done in July, it's likely those discs will turn out a little bit differently. And some of them just might fly better, quote unquote, than others. And of course, the ones that fly best are the money runs. Here's an example. You'll hear people talk about the Proto-Kong version of Paul Macbeth's Discraft Zeus. This was the first prototype version of the Zeus before they actually changed the name. And these have become highly collectible because it had flight characteristics that were particularly desirable. And of course, because there is a finite, limited quantity. But future runs of the Zeus have not been as sought after, and of course, once it entered mass production, there are lots of them around. Now, you can still find Proto-Kongs online. They'll just cost you a pretty penny. Another example is the Innova 3-line AJ Star Destroyer. Or, in other words, a totally random run of Star Destroyer with an Avery Jenkins stamp on it. Innova collectors and throwers swear this is one of the best runs ever. And you can spend up to $90 on eBay to find out for yourself. Of course, neither of these are pre-flight number discs. They're both just examples of money runs. So when most people refer to pre-flight number discs as being so incredibly amazing, it's just a specific money run from before 2008. So what we're going to do today is go down memory lane with this stack of 6 pairs of new and old discs to see if any of them happen to be a bit of a money run. For each, we have a new version and an old version. Now, these may not literally be the same mold because companies' molds wear down and may need to be repaired or replaced over time. And also, of course, these plastic blends have changed dramatically since they were new. Or they simply aren't made in the same type of plastic anymore. What that means for us today is that because these discs are quite old, used, and in some cases barely intact, this is maybe not the most practical test or comparison that we've ever done, but one more done out of curiosity. Are any of these old pre-flight number discs still any good? How do they fly compared to their newer counterparts? And are any of them still usable today? Let's find out and kick things off with our first pair of discs, the Discraft Reaper. And for starters, I have to tell you that this old Elite Z Reaper feels horrible. The plastic is so old and weathered. When you put it in your hand, it feels like the oil from my fingers are just gonna melt through the plastic. And normally I like to bend discs a little bit to show you how flexible they are, but I'm not gonna do that here because I'm afraid it might break. We'll be comparing this to a limited edition Paul McBeth Crystal Reaper from about 3 years ago. The new Crystal Reaper is mildly overstable. It pushes straight for a while before it gets that reliable moderate fade. But the old pre-flight number Reaper is not. It gets a huge turn. A huge turn. And a huge turn on every throw. So is it possible that there's some money run Reapers out there? Maybe. But if they've been thrown any more than this one, they have probably fallen apart by now. Next up, let's take a look at a pair of Discraft X-Clone or Cyclone or something. All right, I'll be honest and say I don't know a lot about this disc, nor was I able to learn much about it online or from anyone that I talked to. So, Discraft experts, you know what to do. Educate us in the comments below. What I do know is that this X-Clone is really very old, but despite that, it actually feels pretty good and the plastic is in decent shape. This X-Clone, and if I'm being honest, I think the guy that sold it to me at Ledgestone may have said it was a Cyclone, which is apparently a different mold. But they do look pretty similar in design. The newer of the two reminds me a lot of a Discraft Passion, but this new disc also has no tooling on the inside of the rim like most Discraft molds, so there's no way to actually tell what it is. And it may surprise you that I don't actually know almost anything about a disc that we're testing. It will also surprise you that the new X-Clone or Cyclone flies like this. And the old X-Clone flies like this. It's pretty unusual to see an old disc with so much overstability. Literally the opposite of what I would expect after a disc has beat in and aged. So maybe this old X-Clone is one of those old money runs that can actually hold its stability. On to our next pair of discs that are also from Discraft. We have an old pre-flight number Mantis and a new Mantis, both in Z plastic. Both are quite domey, and the plastics actually feel quite similar in this case compared to the last two pairs, which were completely different. And perhaps that's why these two Mantis fly so similarly, because the old Mantis on the left gets just a hint more turn than the new Mantis on the right. Now, if you think that there's a bit of a pattern developing between these old and new discs, you'd be right, but it's maybe not the pattern that you would expect. No, it doesn't have anything to do with stability. Instead, it has a lot to do with what brands even have pre-flight number discs. As we established earlier, in order for discs to be pre-flight number, they have to have been manufactured or designed prior to Innova inventing the flight number rating system in 2008. Discraft, of course, is one of those companies, and naturally, Innova is another. And then you have MVP. MVP had their first disc approved in 2009, just after Innova invented the flight number rating system. But crucially, the one that we have here is an early patent-pending Ion, which coincidentally doesn't have flight numbers. But this Ion has definitely seen better days, because while at first glance it looks similar to this new Proton Ion, closer inspection will reveal these micro fractures and cracks in the plastic. They're all throughout the rim, almost all the way around the disc. So once again, I asked Josh to be very delicate and get a few throws before we break this old disc, because this new Ion has the advertised stability of 2.5, 3, 0, 1.5, and it resists turning and gets a nice reliable fade. And at that slow speed and with 3 glide, it also doesn't go very far either. While our old patent pending Ion, on the other hand, was consistently very understable. And it's a classic example of a beaten disc that flies nothing like it originally did after years and years of wear and tear. So let's move on to another driver and our only pair of Innova discs today, the Orc. Rated at 10.4, -1.3, the Orc fits right in that murky gray area between fairway driver and distance driver. And it is, for lack of a better term, a bit of a forgotten mold at Innova. The only notable player I've ever heard use it in recent years is Nate Sexton. The Orc was approved by the PDGA way back in 2004, and it had apparently just been released when I bought this exact pre-flight number Orc at a gas station next to the first course I ever played that very same year. But what you'll also probably notice about this Orc is that the plastic doesn't really look like Champion plastic, nor does it feel anything like modern Champion plastic either. It's gummy and only semi-translucent, while modern Champion plastic these days tends to be a bit more stiff and usually completely translucent. And these are not characteristics that this particular Orc developed over time. This is exactly how it was when I bought it way back in 2004. So we'll be comparing the old gummy Champion Orc to this new Star Orc, mainly because I couldn't find a Champion one, but also because this old Champion feels a lot more like Star or G-Star than modern Champion. And what's perhaps more interesting than how different the plastic feels is how different it flies. The Star Orc from Hyzer doesn't turn at all. It just pushes straight and gets a pretty decent fade. And with a little more power and on a flatter release, the Star Orc will also turn, but not for very long, as that low speed fade kicks in very quickly. Meanwhile, my old pre-flight number Orc just might be from one of those money runs, because at maybe 80% power from Hyzer, it gets a beautiful flip up, drifts out to the right, but still has some late stability to fade forward to over 400 feet, much farther than I ever threw it. Which takes us to our last pair of discs back with Discraft with the Predator. Rated at 9.404, the Predator was approved by the PDGA back in 2002. But this is not my old Predator, it's one of an entire stack that I came across while trying to find discs for this video. This one is an old Elite X Predator. Now, Discraft still makes X plastic, but it is not anything like this old Elite X plastic, because the old Elite X feels more like today's modern ESP, while modern X plastic is this kind of bouncy, rubbery, inexpensive blend. We'll be comparing the old Elite X Predator to a Big Z Predator. They are both 173 grams, both ever so slightly domey, and both overstable? Let's see. The Big Z Predator is every bit as beefy as you might expect it to be. But the old pre-flight number Predator is still really surprisingly overstable. With no turn at all and a pretty consistent fade, it's pretty incredible to see this much overstability from such an old disc. Would that make it a money run? Maybe. Maybe it holds its stability a little bit better than most discs. But regardless of how much you might want some of these old money run pre-flight number discs, I would encourage you to think twice. Because even if you manage to find that perfectly beat-in old pre-flight number money run, and even if you manage to find it for a reasonable price, it will be nearly impossible to replace. And that's just a dangerous way to try and build your bag. Do you bag any pre-flight number discs? And what's the oldest disc in your bag? Let us know in the comments below. And also comment below what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Remember, the disc is in the details. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg, reminding you that while cheese and wine get better with age, eventually older discs do spoil. We'll see you in the next one. And because it's so hard, and perhaps that's why these two Mantis fly so similar. Because at maybe 80% power from Hyzer, it gets this beautiful? It's beautiful. But the old pre-flight number Predator... And also comment below what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.